There would be no outrage about AIG's bonuses if AIG hadn't needed bailing out, right? I mean, sure, people get mad at fat cats with high salaries when everyone else is broke. But it's the fact that this company was using our money, the taxpayers' money, to pay those bonuses that caused the entire country to grind our teeth down to their nubbins, to rage at these guys. So there would be no outrage about AIG turning taxpayer bailout dollars into executive bonuses if there hadn't been a bailout. AIG wouldn't have needed bailing out if it weren't too big to fail, too integral to all the other parts of the financial industry. AIG wouldn't have become too big to fail if they hadn't become a big, hybrid, complicated Uber financial everything company that made all sorts of arcane, financially engineered moves that got them squirreled into every kind of financially related business that you can think of. AIG wouldn't have become a big, hybrid, complicated Uber financial everything company if there hadn't been, and this is key, deregulation of Wall Street that allowed firms to get like that. And massive deregulation of Wall Street wouldn't have happened without the rise of a political movement that preached that regulation was inherently evil and deregulation was inherently wise and virtuous and would make everyone rich, and it would be free, well-behaved puppies for every family. Do you want an example of how this deregulation thing worked? You can totally use this at the high school dance or a bar or whatever to try to impress someone. If somebody starts complaining about the bailout, complaining about AIG, you tell them, actually, the real villain here is Graham Leach Bliley. Just say it with total confidence. Watch, you will get dates. Here's how to explain it. The Graham Leach Bliley Act of 1999 was introduced by 3 Republicans, Graham, Leach, and Bliley. It repealed a wall that had been put up in the Great Depression, a wall that kept investment banks separate from commercial banks, separate from insurance firms, and so on. When that wall got torn down, we ended up with big, hybrid, complicated, Uber financial everything companies that we couldn't have had before. That's how Citibank ended up eating Travelers Group Insurance to change from Citibank into Citigroup, which just happened to be completely impossible to regulate. All of a sudden, with these new uber giant complicated hybrid firms, the Wall Street cops, the regulators, they were essentially still on horseback, while the robbers, the guys trying to get away with anything to make a buck, they were in spaceships. So we had robbers in spaceships and cops on horseback. All right, so if talking about Graham Leach Bliley doesn't get you a date, or at least admiring glances from your peers, drop one of these on them. The Commodity Futures Modernization Act of 2000. That one said that certain things that financial companies do to spread their risk around, to keep their balance sheets looking good even when they're making hugely risky deals. These are things like credit default swaps and collateralized debt obligations. You've heard these terms, right? This legislation decided that those things, those risk-hiding things, would be completely exempt from regulation. Completely exempt. They would not be regulated. So from a cops and robbers perspective, that's like saying, okay, now it's legal to wear a ski mask and carry a gun inside a bank. Oh, and driving a getaway car is legal now, too. How'd you like to be a cop in that town? Deregulation laws like Graham Leach Bliley and the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, these were pushed as great ideas to get the horrible burden of government regulation off of Wall Street. The horrible burden of regulation was lifted off of Wall Street, and then Wall Street proceeded to self-destruct. Now it's time to start over, and maybe this time avoid the same mistakes. Joining us now is Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter David Cay Johnston. He's the author of Free Lunch, How the Wealthiest Americans Enrich Themselves at Government Expense and Stick You with the Bill. Mr. Johnston, thanks for joining us tonight. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Everyone on Capitol Hill is trying to blame each other for the AIG bonuses. Do you think it's possible that this instead could be a teaching moment about why we own AIG in the first place? What went wrong? Do you think it's time to start teaching about regulation and deregulation?
Well, I certainly hope so, because otherwise this will continue to happen. People will take unwarranted risks. You know, the reason we have regulation is not for people who behave, it's for when people misbehave. And if you believe what the banking community said, then let's follow it to its logical conclusion. Why don't we save a lot of money as taxpayers by getting rid of traffic lights and stop signs and speed limits, because we're all responsible drivers. We don't need to be regulated, and traffic will flow smoothly, right?
What could possibly go wrong? Yes. Well, do you think that the people who argued for deregulation of Wall Street in the first place feel at all chastened by what has happened since? Have you seen any signs of penance, any sign that they are changing their minds?
No, and I would be somewhat surprised if they did, because this was done with a lot of ideological fervor. But I don't think that's the important part, Rachel. I think the important part is that the American public recognized that this was a terrible policy mistake. It's costing us dearly, and we should correct that mistake by going back to what has worked for decades and decades, which is sound, reasonable restraint when people are dealing with the money you and I put into from our paychecks into the bank or into the insurance company or anywhere else.
Is there a problem, though, that so many of the people who are considered to be experts in this field are people who have Wall Street experience? And so we don't have essentially an adversarial enough relationship between the proverbial cops and the proverbial robbers in this field.
Well, certainly you need people who have expertise, but it is, I think, a little troubling that the Obama administration has gone back to people who were supporters of these ideas, or at least allowed them to happen. Remember, it was President Clinton who signed both of the bills, which I loved your description of it. I thought that was brilliant. They're the ones who are now running this shop. The rules that we need are not terribly complicated to impose. Separate retail banking, investment banking, and insurance. Don't allow people to borrow with excessive levels of risk. The same thing as not allowing people to buy houses with no money down or borrowing more than the price of the house.
Who are going to be the roadblocks to re-regulation, or towards, I guess, reinstating the old regulations, or whatever they're going to call this in order to make it politically saleable? Who do you think is going to be the opposition in Congress?
Well, whoever Wall Street is financing. I think that Representative Cantor from Virginia has shown himself to be one of the champions of whatever Wall Street wants. Lower tax rates, no regulation. Those people who rely on, for their campaign contributions, on those people who make money when the regulators are not around, or as you put it, the cops are only on horseback.
David Cay Johnston, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, thank you for your time tonight. You have a way of making this stuff understandable. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Rachel.